And welcome everybody to Apocrypha Apocalypse. I am Gary Michuta, and it's time for another chill stream. Yes, indeed. And in fact, I'm thrilled and pumped to be here with you today. As I can see, some of you in the chat room are already thrilled and pumped. Why? Because, well, first, it's always fun to meet with you on a chill stream. But specifically, we're going to talk about Origen of Alexandria. Very important early church father in the history of the canon. It's one early church father that Protestants generally appeal to as affirming the Protestant Old Testament. And in fact, the very first episode today, we're going to dive into Origen's list, which is the main reason why they claim Origen is a friend of the Protestant canon. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a series. We're going to look at it from different perspectives. For example, we're going to look at the list. We're going to look at how Origen uses the Deuterocanon in his writings, which he uses an awful lot. And we're also going to look at a few times where Origen qualifies his use of the Deuterocanon, which is maybe a handful of times, actually. And I'm working on that presentation right now. Some very interesting stuff. So there is items that we need to look at in terms of where he disputes it. Also, another interesting thing with Origen is he has a interchange of letters with Julius Africanus, and that has to do with Deutero-Daniel. And there's some interesting things to pull out there. In fact, this whole dialogue with Africanus is one of the main sources that Mead and Gallagher go to propose their edification theory, namely that books were accepted as sacred scripture just because they were edifying, not because they could confirm doctrine, which we're going to see how Origen uses these books is total nonsense. Total nonsense. But nevertheless, they go to Origen for all this stuff. So we got a lot that we're going to cover in this series. So I hope you guys are as thrilled and pumped as I am to dive into Origen, even though it's 3:30 in the morning here in the Michigan area. And hence, for you who are just joining us that never saw a chill stream, the reason I'm talking in low tones here is because my family's asleep, so I don't want to wake them up. Hence the name chill stream, because we're going to chill here, and we're going to do some deep dives as well. So I want to welcome all of you to the channel, and let's look at the chat room, and we see the usual suspects. By the way, this one I don't think I've ever seen before. So welcome aboard if you're new here. Andy Krim says, the thumbnail man. So apparently you've you're a frequent viewer of the channel. So welcome aboard. You know, there's a lot of people that lurk on this channel. They don't necessarily go on the comment sections. So we don't really know that they're out there. But there's a lot of people that just are there absorbing information and using it. So welcome. Whether or not you leave comments, but it's always fun to see you in the comments section. So, hey, welcome aboard, Annie. Maybe you can participate some more. James Tay is in the house. Hey, James, how you doing? Hollywood Big Boss, thrilled and pumped is in all caps to emphasize that, as well as our good friend Susan is here as well. Love the thumbnail. Hey, thanks. Changed, which there's another person I haven't seen before. Welcome aboard. Yeah, the thumbnail. Let's see if I can bring that up. There you go, guys. Yeah, riffing off the Beatles. And of course, moving from left to right. Although I don't remember which Beatles are which in this photo, so I can't tell you who is who. But we got Sam, we got David, we got William, and myself in the lower right-hand corner. Actually came out really nice, you know, except for Sam's hairline is a little weird, but that's to be expected. But overall, very nice. In fact, I have another thumbnail that riffs off this. So I have thumbnails about thumbnails here on this show. Now, how is that for entertainment? Where is it? Oh, here it is, right in front of me. Here's the other thumbnail. This one's actually AI generated. So these girls don't exist in real life, but they're thrilled and pumped with the Apocrypha Apocalypse live stream. So very funny stuff. So thank you guys. I enjoy doing the thumbnails. I'm glad you enjoy it. Richard, God bless you. Lino is in the house. It'd be cool if there were a thumbnail with the Doors or Nirvana. That would be interesting. But who would be Jim Morrison? That's the real question. Now, guys, when it comes to thumbnails, AI basically selects who is who. Like, for example, in today's thumbnail, let me bring it up again. Today's thumbnail, I basically, how come it didn't come up? Because I didn't add it to the stage. Okay, here we go. Today's thumbnail, it's like I had to try all our faces on each body before the AI selected the ones that seemed to work the best. So I did not determine beforehand who was who. So that will be very interesting to see if we take Lino's suggestion and do the Doors. Who will be Jim Morrison? Will it be David Zavaris? That's my bet, because he seems to always be the lead. Like if there's Mel Gibson, David's face for some reason maps onto any dramatic lead like Mel Gibson. Will it be Sam Shamoon? Will it be William Albrecht? Could it be myself? That would be weird. I don't know. Nirvana, I'd have to think of like a picture of Nirvana that everyone would see and say, hey, that's Nirvana. See, it's got to be iconic. If it's not iconic, then it's not funny. So, Reason Belief is in the house. Ahoy. Hey, he's apparently afloat somewhere. Ahoy, everybody. God bless you all. Hey, God bless you, Reason Belief. By the way, he's a friend of the channel. He's got an awesome channel. Please go over there, subscribe, like, hit the bell if you haven't. Some very good interviews and so on. I don't know if you guys know this. Here's a piece of useless trivia. But apparently when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, he originally the greeting was not going to be hello, but ahoy. And it just didn't take. So at least that's what I heard. I don't know if it's true. And Random Chat is in the house. Which means, watch out, people. Trouble is afoot. Random Catholics. I don't know. We're on the same vibe that we comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. And Random Catholic's going to get me through purgatory. No, I'm just joking. He always makes fun comments. I enjoy it when he's there. Hello, everybody. God bless you. Byzantine Finest is in the house. Yet another mod. And in fact, I got to get some more mods. Hey, Hollywood Big Boss in the house. Hollywood, you've been around for a while. Do you want to be a mod? Remember, with great power comes great responsibility. I'd love for you to join the mod team, the mod squad. Boy, the comments are going crazy here. I lost the place where I was, but let me know in the chat room if you'd like to be a mod. I'll definitely mod you, because you've been around for a while. And I can't remember. With my memory, guys, nowadays, terrible. I don't remember. I know I've offered modship to people, and they basically said, no, that's just too much responsibility. I cannot take that upon myself, which is cool. Maybe I offered it to him, and he said no. Okay. Sorry, I got to go through all these. Secret word. He's already thinking about the secret word, folks. Well, you can declare it, but we run a democracy here, James. Everybody has a voice. Hellenistic, okay, possibly. How about original? with an E. Yes, it's true. There are a lot of lurkers. I know, which is a shame because I'd like to meet you guys. And also, by the way, putting things in the chat, I think also affects the algorithm in a positive way. Changed the appearance of my show with William. Oh, appeared on my show with William. Okay, cool. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I should add you to the team as well, because I appeared on that channel as well. And it's Apologetic Hub, if I remember correctly. James, if you could put that in the chat, I'll give you guys a shout out. Yeah, that was weird. Sam showed us, gave us the gun show inadvertently on the last team stream. Who is Ringo? Sam or William? Keep forgetting to add this stage. I don't know. Okay, guys, this requires some research. I got to Google this. Beatles album covers. Okay, I got to figure out who is who. Okay, so moving from left to right, John Lennon, that is Sam. And then it looks like George is the next. So that would be David. Then Paul McCartney is William. I am Ringo. So there you go. I am Ringo. Ringo Starr. Who, by the way, I think, guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe there's some Beatles experts here. But I think Ringo was the most successful of the Beatles after they broke up, which I don't know if that's true because I would think Paul McCartney would be. But I've seen that claim that he actually sold more albums than any of the other Beatles. I know he had a couple of hit songs, but I would be surprised if that's true. Maybe somebody here knows that. Hey, Raphael, good to see you. Whenever I hear somebody say thrilled and pumped, my brain automatically repeats that with William's voice. Yeah, that happens, doesn't it? And now, whenever I hear Sam's voice, I think of the Gary Chandler show song. Second Nirvana. Okay. Oh, look. Well, guys, can you give me a album cover or a picture that's iconic that like everyone who sees it would know it's Nirvana? If you can do that, I will make one, maybe more thumbs from that. Because I've never been a big fan of Nirvana. I wasn't really into the grunge music. So I don't know what would be iconic of them. Reason Belief as a prayer request, please keep in prayers for those who didn't see the other day. God has opened the door for me to speak at influential and respected Protestant YouTuber and author. So pray for me all goes well, and God keeps me humble. Yes. Hey, if you watch this show, Reason Belief, you will be humbled. But yes, we'll keep you in our prayers, definitely. That's awesome. So Reason Belief is in the house with some prayer requests. So yeah, keep them in your prayers, guys. Yes. And it's a good sign you pray for humility because you're aware of the danger. Yeah, that's why I say ahoy at the beginning of my vids. It's a reference to Alexandria Grandpa. I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. You're trying to popularize it, huh? Bring it back from the dead. And we have a super chat for James Tay. I declare the secret word be Hellenistic, subject to change. Tomorrow's feast day is St. Francis of Assisi. Very cool. Thank you. Well, we will keep that in mind, guys. So a super chat certainly, I think, would persuade people that should be the secret word. Never been a mod before. Do you want to be one? I will make you one. We got to make some more mods. Yeah, if we can volunteer you, I can make you a mod, regardless if you want it or not. Okay. Let's see here. Prudence would dictate that you never make me a mod. Um, I think I offered it to you, didn't you? And you declined, if I remember. But all right, thank you, James. Here we go, guys. Check out this channel, Catholic Apologetics Hub. I knew it had hub in it. One of the friends of the channel, go subscribe and like, hit the bell for James Day and his friend James, the two Jameses. I don't know, is there more on that stream too? I just met you two, but they're kicking off a brand new channel, so every sub counts. So if you could take a second, open up a new tab, run over there, hit subscribe and like, and let's blow up his channel. Although it's a chill stream, so it's not a lot of people watching, but every little bit counts. Okay. Yeah, keep it respectful, Susan says. Do, do, do. Well, they are very good. I mean, everybody here is awesome. It's pretty rare you see somebody get deleted. We always get the bots come on and every now and then making silly comments that have nothing to do with the program. Yes, Ringo. So I'm the drummer. But it is the Gary Michuta. No, it isn't. It's Apocrypha Apocalypse. David and William are my brothers in arms. Yeah, thanks, James. Now I got Sam's voice in my head. By the way, Sam hasn't been here to sleep. I hope he's have good sleeps. Oh, cool. All right. I dub thee mod. Hollywood Big Boss, you are a mod. Hold on a second. Add as moderator. Make sure I got this right. Ooh, I almost made you the wrong one. There we go. Dun, dun, dun. You are now officially a mod of the channel. Do, 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 do. Hey, Justified Janice is here. Awesome. God bless you. Thanks for coming on. Um, uh, yeah, I don't know. Is he? It seems to me that uh, William gets under Sam's skin, or he gets him pumped up. Let's put it that way. Not to say he irritates him, because that's not what I wanted to say. But I think he's more of uh, a stimulant rather than a depressant, if we are going to put it in medical terms. Okay, cool. All right, guys. Well, I think we met everybody, greeted everybody. We're ready to dive into Origin of Alexandria. And we got a lot to cover. Just covering Origen's background is a lot to cover. So let's get into it, shall we? All right. Well, that's not what I wanted. Take that down. Here we go. Origin of Alexandria. Let's go to slides. By the way, guys, hey, thank you, James Day, for this super chat. By the way, if you want to support this channel really quick, I forgot to do my commercial announcement. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Really appreciate that. Helps with the algorithm. Also, making comments too, I think helps the algorithm. If you want to support us financially, there's memberships. I am currently doing a series where I'm breaking down Steve Christie's Why Protestant Bibles Are Smaller book for members. We've done other things. Williams contributed even, and perhaps David in the future will do some members only stuff. So you can access that. That is part of our thank you. Also on Sundays, I have a live stream that I do members only where you can ask anything. We talk about all sorts of cool stuff like thumbnail ideas or music, movies, apologetics, what's happening on the scene, In fact, we talked about last time the members got together, we were talking about Tovia Singer actually giving a great apology for the Catholic Church and the Canon, um, which was really weird on our members only stream. So consider being a member if you aren't already, and also Patreon. Patreon, you get a bunch of free ebooks when you join. You get access to free stuff as well, including I think I did a Bible study on the Book of Wisdom, and you get the PDFs for these chill streams. So as soon as I'm done here, folks, I'm going to jump on Patreon and upload the PowerPoint for today. So that way you can have access to a huge library of PDFs as a Patreon member. Okay, so end the commercial. With the lights out. Okay, with the lights out. I will keep that under consideration. In fact, I'm looking it up right now. Oh, okay. Yeah, I could. That's easy. Is that, hopefully that's iconic enough that people know what I'm riffing off of. Okay, yes. Can't wait for the Jewish Alexandrian text. Yeah, here it comes. But first, we got to learn a little bit about Origen. Again, I'm borrowing from Jurgen's Faith Early Fathers, not because it's necessarily the best biographical information, but I love it because it's very pithy and it kind of does a good job hitting the high points as far as a quick bio. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on the bio, but in case you guys aren't familiar with Origen, Origen is a very colorful ecclesiastical writer. He's technically not considered early church father um, because he speculates a lot, which generally is okay. But the problem was later, after he dies, a group of people started taking some of his speculations and running with it. And it caused so much trouble in the church. By the way, they're called Origenists because they used Origen, that when Origenists were condemned, the church also condemned Origen. Hence, he's not considered a church father, just an ecclesiastical writer, but he is very, very influential indeed. Yeah, I have to bring this up. Sorry, guys. Byzantine Finest is right. Yeah, it's the only good argument I've heard Tovia make, laugh out loud. But when it comes to trying to debunk Christianity, I've never heard Tovia make a good argument. I am 130% agreement with you, Byzantine Finest. In fact, it's weird to actually agree with something he says. And he actually must have studied it because what he says actually seems pretty based. Okay, so what can we say about him? There's more biographical details available for Origen than for any of the earlier theologians, mostly because the sixth book of Eusebius' History of the Church is devoted almost entirely to him. So Eusebius was a fanboy of Origen, so we know a lot about him. He is born about the year 185 AD in Alexandria, the child of Christian parents. When his father, Saint Leonides, was martyred in the persecution of Septimius Severus in the year 202 AD, Origen's mother prevented him from accompanying his father to martyrdom by the simple expedient of hiding his clothes. So apparently, young Origen was too modest to be martyred naked. And it worked. He didn't get martyred, at least not that. He does die a martyr's death, though. It is generally stated that he castrated himself, probably soon after the death of his father, but statements which lead to that conclusion are open to other interpretation, and the facts are far from certain. Yes, so he was, there is this idea out there that he made himself a eunuch for the kingdom of God, which, if you think about it, is quite ironic that Origen, who loves allegory, would have understood Jesus' words so literally. Think about it, folks. It's actually kind of funny. Yeah, that could be one of the most cryptic jokes ever stated on the Apocrypha Apocalypse. Church writer or another title. Yeah, exactly. Like ecclesiastical writer, church writer. Um, Technically, he's not a church father, although, you know, that's only if you use it technically. You might catch me occasionally referring to him as a church father, which, most people aren't that techie. Yeah, that's what the story is. He literally made himself a eunuch. But like Jurgen says, it's open to other interpretations, so he may not have. He was under the direction. It was under the direction of Origen, successor to Clement of Alexandria, which we just recently did on a chill stream, that the school of Alexandria reached its highest prominence about 212 AD. So this is very early, very beginning of the third Christian century. He journeyed to Rome, where he made acquaintance with Hippolytus, another chill stream guy, Hippolytus of Rome. And he left Alexandria again about the year 215 when the Emperor Caracalla, I think it is, was looting the city and persecuting its teachers. Going to Caesarea in Palestine, he preached to the congregation there in Scripture, though he was a layman, at the request of Theocritus, bishop of Caesarea, and Alexander, bishop of Jerusalem. Demetrius, Demetrius, the bishop of Alexandria, raised strong objections to Origen having been permitted to preach and demanded his return to Alexandria. And this is where things start going a little bit awry in his life. So he gets in trouble because that was against canon law, I believe, that laymen were not allowed to preach in church. 15 years later, Origen again passed through Caesarea on a journey to Greece in order to obviate any further objections to a layman being allowed to preach. Alexandria and Theocritus, I don't know how you pronounce his name, ordained him to the priesthood. So they ordained him. That way there won't be any trouble with the layman being preaching. Demetrius is now quite thoroughly enraged at the flagrant breach of canons, which apparently already demanded that a man be ordained only by the bishop of the diocese in which he's resident. So by trying to obviate problems, they actually made a bigger problem by violating canon law. He called two synods in Alexandria in 230 and 231 AD, which deposed, degraded, and excommunicated Origen, who then moved to Caesarea in Palestine, where he founded a school patterned after that of Alexandria. During the Diocletian persecution, he was tortured and imprisoned, likely in Caesarea, and as a result of the sufferings, he died entire at the age of 69 in 253 or 254. So Origen did a lot of traveling. Of course, he is known as the father of textual criticism. He's the first father to do an in-depth comparison of different translations and manuscript traditions. So he's a brilliant exegete, but he also kind of went off the deep end in certain areas as well. So, which is a shame because he really does have some really great insights and yet some really bad mistakes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's actually a good move there, Random Catholic. I never thought about that. That you prefers to refer to him as early exegete, especially when using him with Protestants. Yeah, that's I like that. All right. So that's the bio. I personally love Origen, despite his problems. Disputes known as the Origenist controversies in respect to the orthodoxy of his doctrine arose never during his life, but 3 times after his death in AD 300, around AD 300, 400, and 550. He was a great scholar and a great theologian who strove always to be Catholic in his faith, yet he came finally to be regarded as a heretic, which accounts largely for the fact that many of his writings have perished entirely, while much that is extent has suffered terribly at the hands of expurgators, interpolators, and translators. And like I said, I think Jurgens hits the nail on the head here. First, Origen wrote an enormous amount of work. It's just him doing the hexapla, where he's comparing. He basically places the Bible in columns in different translations. I mean, that's a lifetime worth of work. But he has commentaries and homilies and everything you can think of. And from this enormous amount of work, only a small percentage of it has survived the ages. Yet we have so many. I mean, what has survived is a very sizable chunk. I mean, it's a huge amount, even though it's a fraction of what he actually wrote. So he provides a pretty good a high definition picture, right? We kind of use this analogy on the Apocrypha Apocalypse. Television, there's standard def, there's high def, there's Ultra HD, right? And so on and so forth. The difference is how many pixels there are on the screen, because the higher amount of pixels, the higher definition the picture will become. And the same thing's true for the early fathers and other writers in antiquity. The more writings we have from that particular father, the clearer understanding we have of his use of the Deuterocanon and his views. I mean, that kind of stands to reason. So Origen is a pretty sizable amount of writings that we have, but it's only a fraction of what he actually wrote. In fact, we're still discovering stuff from Origen. Just recently, I think it was a homily was discovered from Origen. I can't remember, but very interesting stuff. And by the way, what Jurgens says here is absolutely true. Like, the Origenists were the ones that really ultimately torpedoed Origen from ever being a church father or a saint, even though he was martyred. And he was definitely zealous for the faith. So these guys kind of ruined it for Origen. He probably wouldn't have been excluded from the early church fathers just because of his speculations. However, the one thing that does affect Origen, and this is really important for the canon, you always have to keep this in the back of your mind. Some of the things that we have from Origen today has come to us through the hands of translators. And sometimes those translations are very heavily biased. Sometimes they edit Origen. So we have a lot of Origen. Some of it's in the original Greek. A lot of it's through the Latin translation. And sometimes the Latin translations are not faithful to the original, because we find fragments of the Greek, we compare it with the Latin, and we see problems. Okay. So some of the stuff you have to take with a grain of salt. Hence, the chill streams, we're going to go in deep, but we're going to try our best to get as clear a picture as we can regarding Origen. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, we still got more Jurgens. Like I said, it's going to be a lengthy series. Just recapping them. His bio is long. Okay. Much, of course, has been written by Origen, but there remains today a great need for a fresh and thorough reinvestigation of his doctrine. It must be pointed out, however, that it's very dubious that such a reinvestigation could reach conclusions of any satisfactory degree of certainty. As hinted above, his literary productivity was tremendous. Eusebius compiled a list of his writings, but even the list has perished. Jerome knew the list and said that Origen's writings totaled some 2,000 books. Epiphanius gives the figure at 6,000. So we possess only a very small fraction of his actual literary output, probably not much more than 100th part of what he wrote, and even this is generally in a poor state of preservation. So we have a pretty high def picture of Origen, but not as good as it could be. And even what we have is problematic. So, okay, so we got all the warnings out. I think that's it for Jurgens. So let's move to our first order of business, and that is the list. The list. Now, guys, as you know, Protestant apologetics for the Protestant Old Testament canon almost always focuses on list, sometimes exclusively on list. That is because if you narrow your scope of research to only list, that's the closest you come to affirming the Protestant canon. And even then, it doesn't. None of the lists actually square perfectly with the Protestant canon, or at least extremely rarely do they square exactly with the Protestant canon. And they'll ignore things like usage, or they'll try to prioritize list. So it's like a trump card that trumps how they use these books and other writings, sometimes even within the same writing. So that's why we're focusing on Origen's list, because whenever he's enlisted in support of the Protestant Old Testament canon, invariably what's pointed to is his list. So his list is on our list of things to do. So, by the way, for you just coming in, welcome aboard, everybody. We're talking about Origen of Alexandria. We just went over the bio. So if you're interested in who he is, you can watch earlier in the chill stream. We're going to start looking at his list, which we don't have. And this is one problem already. We do not have the book which Origen has this list. All we have is the list that comes to us through Eusebius's church history, the great repository of quotations. If it wasn't for Eusebius, we wouldn't have the Greek of this list. So we're going to have to look closely at what Eusebius gives us and try to make some inferences to see what exactly is going on. Why does he give the list? What's the list supposed to represent? Because, guys, this is another thing that Protestant apologetics doesn't do. They take a list, they assume that the early church father is listing the books that Christians accept as canonical, and then run with it, that is what the list represents. But as you know on the channel, a list can represent all sorts of different things, not necessarily the books that you believe to be canonical. In fact, sometimes, like for example, Melito Sardis, we've already gone over his list. When we looked at it in depth, what we find is Melito's list didn't represent what Christians believed was the canon. Rather, it represented what Rabbinic Judaism accepted as scripture for the purpose of Christian evangelism, because you got to use those books that you hold in common, right? And so we got to kind of assess what exactly is going on here with Origen. And what's the purpose? Is he giving us a Christian list of Old Testament books, a Jewish list of Old Testament books? What is he trying to accomplish with this list? Okay. There's some interesting comments here. Let's just look at them really quick before we go to the list. It's funny how Protestants run to list whenever books listed don't match. Yeah, that's true. At least it doesn't perfectly match. The list, so narrow-minded. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's strange that when you're trying to investigate what is the view of the early church, it's very strange that you would restrict your information rather than try to inculcate as much information as possible. When somebody tries to restrict your inquiry, that should be a huge red flag, because it seems as if there's things that they want to exclude. So you'll find this with Jehovah's Witnesses, and you'll find it all over the place. So whenever that happens, guys, red flag time, right? Why are you trying to narrow what counts as evidence? Why not take all the evidence and just critically go through it? List and lexicons in Paris. Oh my, yes. Indeed. Always the list. Always list. Yes. Okay, so we gotta find out what in the world is going on with the list. So here we have Eusebius's introduction. Now remember, this comes as a fragment in Eusebius, so Eusebius tells us a little bit. But remember, this is Eusebius's view. This is not necessarily Origen's view, because Eusebius wanted to collect as much information about which books certain fathers used and seemed to have accepted. But my assessment of Eusebius is he was just collecting information indiscriminately. He wasn't really trying to look through this stuff in a systematic way, like to ask those further questions, like, what does this represent? Is this list represent the belief of the father or the common books between Catholics or Christians and Jews? Or is it some other thing being represented? He didn't care. He just preserved it. So, okay. So let's start with Eusebius. He says this, quote, "Now, when he expounded the first psalm, he made presentation of a catalog of the sacred scriptures of the Old Testament, that is, actually it should be the Old Covenant, writing somewhat in the following words, quote, it should be known that according to the Hebrew tradition, there are 22 canonical books. Now the Greek there for canonical is incovenanted books, if you will, because it uses the word covenant and it has a prefix in, so it's incovenanted books. The same as the number of the letters of their alphabet. Okay, so we already went into the Greek, but first, as you guys know, if you don't know Greek on this channel, don't worry. For the chill streams, I'm going to color code it so the English matches the color in Greek. And it also helps Greek readers as well, because then you can find the text really quick. So you can see here, he talks about the sacred writings of the Old Covenant or the Old Testament. It uses the word Theotokos. Okay, so it's the word for covenant or testament. And then he says, he quotes Origen. So he gives, in his introduction, he gives this one quote. He actually gives two quotes from Origen. And these little quotes are important because Origen says, it should be known that according to Hebrew tradition, and that's in blue, and in Greek in blue, it says as Hebrew handed on, or paradosin. Paradosis is the word which we get tradition from. So it's something that's handed on. So this is something he is handing on from the rabbis. So this is according to Hebrew tradition. So that's the first red flag for us, right? What is this list supposed to represent? Well, we know that it comes from the rabbis. Okay. Then he says there are 22 canonical books, but again, he doesn't use the word canon in Greek. And I have this in Origen, not in Origin, but Orange. In Orange, it's not canonical, it's incovenanted books. And this is important because Origen, there is no clear indication that Origen ever used the word canon to describe a collection of sacred scripture like we do today. So whenever you see the word canon pop up in Origen, you got to be careful because he doesn't use that word like we do today. That was coined by Athanasius of Alexandria. That seems to be the earliest known usage of the word canon to describe the contents of the Bible. But Athanasius was after Origen. So just keep that in mind. So this is according to Hebrew tradition, that there are 22 incovenanted books, whatever that means, the same number as the letters of the alphabet. Now, I believe this is the first time that we run in church history of a Christian recognizing this correspondence of numbers of letters in the alphabet, Hebrew alphabet, and the books of the Rabbinic Bible. So he seems to be the first Christian to explicitly point that out. Okay. Now, this is from Lee Martin McDonald's book, commenting on Eusebius. He says, Eusebius is sometimes credited as the first person to use the word canon in reference to the collection of Christian scriptures. And he cites what we just read. But a careful study of his reference to the scriptures of the church indicate that his favorite term for this literature was homolegomena, okay, which means recognized or acknowledged, and incubonated, okay, and diathekos, which is more accurately incubonated. So basically, he points that out, that he doesn't use canon. He prefers recognized, homolegomenon, or incubonated, and diathekos, okay? So I just wanted to point that out, that this isn't me reading something in the Origen. It's there in the Greek. We saw that here. And Lee Martin McDonald points it out in his book. Moving on. Eusebius says, then further on, he adds these words. Now, this is the second quote. The first quote he gives is where Origen says, it should be known that according to Hebrew tradition, there are 22 incubonated books, the same number as the letters of the alphabet. Now, here's the second quote. He says, 22 books according to the Hebrews are these, that which is called Genesis, but among the Hebrews, at the beginning of the book, Bereshith, which is in the beginning. Okay. So in those two small quotations, the first one that we read and here at the introduction to the list itself, notice what Origen is saying. He's saying according to Hebrew tradition. It says according to the Hebrews handed this on. So clearly his source is rabbinic, right? He's not giving us a Christian canon, unless you presume at the outset that the Christian canon is identical or it's copying the Hebrew canon. But that's something that needs to be argued separately, right? If you're just interpreting Origen just as he says right here, we have every reason to believe that he is presenting the rabbinic canon to Christians. Now, why do we say that? Well, because notice what he gives us here. First, he says the title of the book. So he gives the Greek title for Genesis, which does my quote include that? Bereshith. Okay. Yeah, it gives Genesis. I'm sorry. For some reason, I couldn't find the word Genesis in Greek. Yeah, so first he gives the Greek title of the book, Genesis. Then he gives the Hebrew title, Bereshith. And then he gives the interpretation of the Hebrew, which is in the beginning. In fact, it's the first word of Genesis is the title of the book, Bereshith. In the beginning, okay? So he's definitely, what he's doing is he's trying to reproduce the 22 books of the Rabbinic Bible according to Hebrew tradition, right? For a Christian audience. Hence, he starts off with the Christian name of the book, Genesis. He gives the Hebrew name. So he's trying to give Hebrew names of books, which is Bereshith. And then he gives the interpretation. What does Bereshith mean in Hebrew? It means in the beginning, in arche, here in Greek. Okay, so that's the purpose of the list, is to provide Christians with this information from Hebrew tradition, corresponding to 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, continuing, obviously, we're not going to reproduce the entire list. take up too much of a page. Doesn't really need to. I could give you a summary. But here it is. Those are just two quotes that he gives, both of them indicating it comes from rabbinic computation of 22, based on 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And I wish I knew I had that slide. I wouldn't have gone through it. So here's the list. And he has Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, which would be Jesus, son of Nave, Judges, Ruth, and he points out that Judges and Ruth with them in one book, so they combine it. Of Kingdoms, first, second, with them one, so that's combined. Samuel, Kingdoms 3 and 4 are one. So notice he's given, again, the Greek Christian computation, or excuse me, the Greek Christian names, and then he's telling Christians how they're combined by the rabbis in order to come up with 22 books or 22 letters, corresponding to 22 letters. So then you have Chronicles 1 and 2 in one. Then you have Esdras 1 and 2 in one. Esdras being the helper. The book of Psalms, Proverbs of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, not as some suppose, Songs of Songs. By the way, that little note there that Origen kind of makes a point that seems kind of ridiculous, or not ridiculous, but needless, right? It's like, Origen, you have OCD. Why do you have to make a comment like that? Well, actually, one of the qualifications that's brought up against the Catholic/Orthodox canon is found in his commentary on Song of Songs. And this is something that was one of his big pet peeves. So just FYI, for a later chill stream, remember this, that in his list, he makes this little notation that's kind of out of place. He doesn't say this for anything else. But when it comes to Song of Songs, he notifies the reader that it's not songs, plural, of song, but song of songs. So trust me, guys, put that in your back pocket. It's going to be important later. Hopefully you remember that several chill streams from now when we actually get to the end of Origen. Continuing on, it says Elias, which is Isaiah, Jeremiah, with Lamentations and the letter in one. And that we'll talk about that in a second. So it's not just Jeremiah and Lamentations like Protestant Bible has, but there's another writing, perhaps two writings in addition to that. Daniel, Ezekiel, Job, Esther. And then he does something really weird. He says, besides these, there are the Maccabees, which are entitled Sarbeth Sebniel. Origen, why? Why did you include a mention of Maccabees, a Deuterocanonical books? Okay. And notice he gives the book and he gives the Hebrew title. But he says, besides these, besides the 22, apparently, there's Maccabees, right? Why mention a book that the rabbis don't accept? We're going to try to figure out that problem. So that's one of the problems with his list. It's like, for some bizarre reason, he includes Maccabees and its Hebrew title. Now, I'm not faulting him. In fact, I'm really appreciative that he does this, because otherwise we wouldn't have known that the books of Maccabees were still being circulated within Rabbinic Judaism in Hebrew. Why do I say that? Well, because he's able to reproduce the Hebrew title for these books. So that means even after these books were rejected by Akiva, right, back in the beginning of the second Christian century, Jews were still copying it in Hebrew and apparently reading it as well. Now, the Hebrew would not have vowel points. So let's add one further note here. The Hebrew of Scripture and Maccabees would be consonantal. That means that it's through memorization and tradition, if you will, that you know which vowels go where, which is very interesting, right? Because not only Maccabees would be copied, but like the canonical books, there would be this memory of how to put the vowels in the right places, which means that it was read pretty thoroughly, right? Okay, there's a bunch of interesting things in the chat. I want to go to them really quick because you guys, I think you are the best, most educated chat room out there. And by the way, if please don't let that deter anybody from putting stuff in chat. Don't worry if you make a silly comment. There's silly comments too, but you guys are awesome, and so that's why I always like to tap into what you have to say. Christ himself seems to have spoken them as sex, his challenge to their activities, authority, viewpoint. Okay, I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Hmm. Read Dr. Arnold Fruckenbaum's Israelology, Missing Link of Systematic Theology. Met Dr. F in Vegas. Oh, interesting, Christopher. By the way, welcome to the stream. I don't remember seeing your name up there. Gary, technically, he mentioned 3 deuteros. Yeah, but we'll get into that. Hold on, James. We're taking this slow. We're going step by step. So, yeah, we'll get to that. So he does mention 3 if you include Maccabees, but I think actually 4, and I'll explain why. It seems like these rabbis were speaking of accepted 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Here's what I think is going on, Hollywood Big Boss. So, spoiler alert, guys. What I think is going on, the Deuterocanon, it's kind of like what happened with the Protestant Bible, right? When the Reformers rejected the Deuterocanon or they downgraded it to Apocrypha, they still included it within Protestant Bibles. They didn't remove these books outright. So you have to ask yourself, why didn't the Protestants remove these books? After all, they're just mere human writings, right? Well, the Reformers thought it was more than that. That's a later view of Protestants. But why didn't they remove these books from Protestant Bibles if they weren't scripture in the fullest sense? And the answer is because the earliest Protestants were all former Catholics, and they knew these books belonged in sacred scripture. So when the Reformers downgraded them to Apocrypha, it would have been too radical to remove them entirely from the Protestant Bible. So what they did was they included it in the appendix. They put a warning preface, right? And they slowly push it out of the Protestant Bible. So it really wasn't until the 1820s that you start having a majority of Protestant Bibles without the so-called Apocrypha. Now, I think that's very realistic because it makes perfect sense that these former Catholics, they know these books belong in the scripture. If you took them out of the Bible, it would have been too obvious and too radical of a change. So instead, they're left in, they're given quasi-biblical status for a little while, then eventually they're pushed out. I think the same thing happened in Rabbinic Judaism. I think when the rabbis came up with their standardized canon or collection of sacred text, that's probably a better way to describe it. It would have been too radical to get rid of these books entirely because even within rabbinical Judaism, there's Jews that believe these books, some or much or all of the Deuterocanon, was inspired, was sacred. So what they did was they continued to copy these books. They were continually read, maybe not studied as intently as the Proto-Canon, but they're still kind of there in the background, being copied in Hebrew or Aramaic and being associated with the sacred books, but being distinguished from the sacred books, kind of like what happens in early Protestantism. And that's why when Origen is trying to find out or to present the books according to Hebrew tradition, he's able to come up with Maccabees' Hebrew title because it's still being copied and read, even at this date. So that's my theory. I think it's a pretty base theory in light of the fact that we know so little about this. And it also makes sense too about, as we've been talking about earlier, how that rabbinic norm that starts in from Jamnia or Usha, that normative collection of sacred texts from the rabbis, it needs time to promulgate to the rest of Judaism. It has to get into the diaspora. And so you have this like unfolding recognition from Christians saying, noticing when we're evangelizing these Jews, they're not accepting some of the things we're saying because they don't accept these books. That's why these list comes up, is to help Christians know which books the rabbis use and which ones they don't, because of that norm is now becoming standardized, and that takes a couple of centuries. The diaspora is the last part of Judaism to adopt the rabbinic canon. We know the example in the life of Daniel that it's not in the Hebrew text, but we use it because we accept the church's origin. Yeah, that's good. Good point. Good point there. So Hanukkah is still using the Maccabees. I think you meant the Jews are using Maccabees in support of Hanukkah. I don't know. Origen doesn't say. And I don't think we have anything to point that direction. It could be, but I don't think there's any evidence for it. I do appreciate the efforts of Origen. Oh, yeah, I do too. Absolutely. Pink Nickel Viz. So you guys, hey, welcome aboard. I don't remember seeing your name. So the Epistle of Jeremiah, 1st, 2nd Maccabees, does this open the possibility of Baruch was included here? Yeah, we'll get to that. I know you guys are chomping at the bit. I just want to take this slow so everybody's on the same page. I guess Esther is Alexandrian Esther. That's actually a really interesting question, James. My gut feeling would be it'd be Hebrew Esther because he's given the Hebrew title. That would be my guess. Now, remember, this is according to Hebrew tradition. This is not according to Christians. If it was a Christian list, it would have Deuteroesther as well. Yeah, chill streams are pretty in depth, and we got a lot to cover. So kick back, relax. If it's morning, have your cup of iced tea or whatever and Pop Tart. Enjoy the chill stream. If it's evening, kick back with an adult beverage and enjoy the chill stream because we got a lot to cover. And in fact, I don't even think I'm going to be able to get through the entire list today. But because there's a lot of people here and those who are going to watch this video in the future that are new to the issue of the canon, I want to take my time and make sure everybody's up to speed. Because, like I said, this list is almost always in Protestant apologetics. So we need to take our time and look at this thoroughly. I make this comment because I am a clown, just clowning, arranging psalms and singing 1:30 a.m. That's funny. There you go. Christopher, what's wrong with the conclusions arrived at First Council of Nicaea? Gary needs to pick up evidence that demands a verdict by Josh McDowell. Maccabees might have been read very thoroughly. So were Gnostic works as evidenced by the Nag Hammadi. Yeah. Well, I do. I have McDowell's book. I got McDowell's book in different editions. I've read it. I have the updated version of McDowell's book. The canonical sections in those books are horrible. They're absolutely horrible. They might have been read very thoroughly. True. Maybe they were studied Gnostic things. Maybe. But were they copied in Hebrew? Ha ha. Why are these Jews continually copying? Because remember, Christians wouldn't be copying this in Hebrew. Only Jews would, because they read Hebrew and Aramaic, right? So this isn't Christians preserving Hebrew Maccabees. This is Jews preserving Hebrew Maccabees. Because remember, this is third Christian century, early third century. Why? Right. Later second Maccabees. Guessing Esdras. No, James, I would probably say this is Ezra and Nehemiah in one book. And Daniel, I'm not sure what the Daniel is. I guess it would be Hebrew or Aramaic Daniel. Hey, good morning, Tony. Welcome aboard. Yeah, I'm not sure, Christopher, why you're bringing up Gnostic texts. We're talking about Old Testament canon here. That's what this list is pertaining to. I'm just going to skip over some of these. There's so many great comments, but we got to move. Okay. Yeah, let's try to keep the comments focused on the presentation, if you wouldn't mind. Although I am enjoying some of these discussions. Oh, that's cool. Been lurking. I knew you're out there. Hey, that's awesome. Welcome aboard, my friend. Thank you for watching the channel. I'm recovering. I think share the true gospel. Oh, okay. But Christopher, you don't understand that we believe that Jesus died once on the cross and was raised victoriously over sin and death. That's perfectly Catholic. So I don't know why you're saying recovering Catholic. Doesn't make sense. Love the channel. Thank you. Interestingly, Esther is the only book of the Old Testament not found in Dead Sea Scrolls. True. Well, actually, Nehemiah also isn't there. And I would also say the Deuterocanon is not there, except for Tobit and Sirach. But I think you're talking about Proto-Canon books, proto-canonical books. I did not suggest it belonged, not belonged. Just interesting. It is. And Esther is also not cited in the New Testament. Okay, I think I'm caught up on comments. Okay, so very interesting stuff. Now, there is something that's omitted in this list. Does anybody know which book of the Proto-Canon is not in Origen's list? I'll put the slide up so you can quickly see that. Yeah, I know. James, I'm running short on time. I'm going to have to bug out soon, so I can't go through everything. Guys, what proto-canonical book is not listed by Origen? Come on, you guys, put your Bible thinking caps on. Do the little song. For those who are from Protestant background, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think I might touch on it later in a different chill stream. So I don't want to do that now because I got to organize my presentation to get through the material that I need to. No, proto-canonical, Pablo. But yeah, you're right. It's missing. It seems like it's missing Baruch. I got to be careful. Okay. Do you see the 12 minor prophets anywhere? That's a huge omission. Huge omission. All of the 12 minor prophets are not mentioned. Yet, no one ever doubts the sacredness of the 12 minor prophets. So Origen appears to have made a boo-boo. Yeah, Malachi is part of the 12 minor. Yeah, that is a huge omission. And I have a theory about that. There's a couple of theories as to why it's omitted, or a couple of possibilities. But let's go into the particulars of this list. Okay, so Proverbs of Solomon, called Maloth. That's important because, guys, if you ever see my presentation where I debunk Anthony Rogers' um, use of where he looks at Melito Sardis, and he argues that when Melito says "and the wisdom," that's not referring to the Book of Wisdom. In my presentation, I noted that the all virtuous wisdom or the wisdom can refer not only to Proverbs, but it can also refer to Sirach and Wisdom of Solomon. And I also noted that we know that the Hebrew title for Sirach is the same title for Proverbs, and that is uh, parables or Maloth. So this is important confirmation of that because Origen's able to give the same for Proverbs, right? Now, Jeremiah with Lamentations and the letter in one. So I give you the Greek right here. Now, the epistle, what is the epistle? The letter. Scholars think this might be a reference to the epistle of Jeremiah, which is chapter 6 of Baruch. However, it's more likely that the epistle actually is referring to the book of Baruch and the epistle of Jeremiah, because Baruch's written in Hebrew, and also the book of Baruch is sometimes called the epistle of Baruch, which makes things even more confusing, right? Because you have the epistle of Jeremiah, the epistle of Baruch, book of Baruch, book of the letter of Jeremiah, right? So in the ancient world, Baruch was sometimes called the epistle. Baruch is in Hebrew. Hence, this might be more likely a reference to the book of Baruch and the epistle of Jeremiah. That's why I said we got to talk about this more. Okay. Well, Christopher, welcome aboard. But our focus here is on, I would love to talk to you about that privately, but the focus here is on the Old Testament canon and how Protestants are missing 7 books from the Old Testament. So, hey, that's our main focus here. Okay, Esther is placed last in his list. Now, usually when something is placed last, not always, but usually if something's last, it could indicate uncertainty. Okay, and scholars have noted this, that he places Esther last maybe because this is a disputed text that's now being affirmed, which would fit perfectly with what we see in rabbinic literature and also Christian literature, as far as what the Jews. Now, Christians always accepted Esther with the Deuterocanonical sections. There's no indication of that not being the case until you get to Jerome, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I believe Jerome. But in rabbinic Judaism, there was lots of disputes as to whether Esther was sacred or not. And we're talking Hebrew Esther that actually doesn't even mention the name God, and it doesn't include, pious acts like prayers and fasting and things like that. Now we come to the issue at hand, and I think we're just going to address this, and then I got to bug out. In fact, I think I'm not even going to be able to address this issue. So this would be a good cliffhanger for the next chill stream. What about the addition of Maccabees? Origen curiously adds Maccabees, even though he states that it's besides these, that's besides the 22. So why include it? He also supplies the Hebrew text, which I said was copied and circulated amongst the Jews, albeit in a subcanonical work. So that is the question we're going to address in the next chill stream. Okay. Why in the world, Origen, would you include Maccabees when you say that it's not part of the 22? And that's the only book outside the 22 he ever gives. So I'm going to give you my theory. We're going to explore different ideas out there as to what's going on. And I'll let you decide, as always. Okay? Trying very hard. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Great power comes great responsibility. Okay, guys, we have come to the end of the chill stream. So there's your cliffhanger, guys. Come back. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. Come back to the next chill stream, and we're going to answer that question. Why in the world, Origen, would you include something outside the 22 if the whole purpose was to give the 22? We'll explore that. So guys, before we go, please like, subscribe, hit the bell for us. Do us a favor. That helps the algorithm. That's great. Thank you guys for your support financially as well as showing up here. I am honored that anybody shows up for any of my chill streams. And we need the secret word, as James Tay has pointed out. And since we're short on time, let me add this to the stage. Since we're short on time, usually we get ideas for the secret word from the thumbnail, though we don't need to. James Tay suggests, and he actually did a super chat to the effect that he would like Hellenistic to be the secret word. What do you guys think? You want to go with that? Yes, exactly. Okay, let's go with it. Okay, Hellenistic. So this is your opportunity, folks, to flex in the chat room and show the world that you survived a chill stream. So please put Hellenistic in the chat. Flex to everybody out there that you made it. Our next chill stream, today is Friday. The next chill stream will be Monday if God wakes me up at 2 a.m. Okay. So if you miss it, don't worry, it's up on YouTube, but share it. Tell people about the channel. Love to have people come here, especially, by the way, there are Protestants that are watching. Invite your Protestant friends. I'd love to give you the other side of the story about the Old Testament because you're only hearing a small portion of the evidence for the Old Testament canon. So that's what we do here, guys. Thank you so much for all your support. And I think we're going to do a team stream, God willing, maybe this 2 p.m. Eastern time today with William and David. I don't know. David's busy. He might not make it. I'll check with William, and we'll be back on later today. So don't miss it if you're still awake. Okay? Gotta go. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.